Hello.
Good, good, good. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here. This section is on workforce development. So we have a team of esteemed panelists here, and they will be speaking about the emergence of automation and artificial intelligence and the impact on their industries, the various industries that they work in, and how their fields of, practice have handled disruptive technologies in the past, particularly surrounding the potential of AI to exacerbate the workforce crisis or lead to change in roles and new positions that previously never existed. So AI is productive disruption. It's going to disrupt, but at the same time, it's going to provide new opportunities for us to be able to utilize it to enhance our expertise or areas of practices. So we have 3 panelists here. From my far right there, we have Amy Sprung. She's director.
Actually, I'm Kathleen Walsh.
Oh, Kathleen Walsh. Okay, sorry about that. Let me just go there. I should have arranged the setting. Yeah. So my far right there is Kathleen Walsh. She's a managing partner for Conelytica. Conelytica, I think is a company. So she's one of our panelists. And then next to her is Amy Sprung. She's the director of Microsoft State Government Affairs. And then next to her we have Jose Ramirez. He's the director analyst with Gartner. So they will be speaking to us about workforce development and how we can leverage AI to be able to enhance our practices and our professions. So panelists, welcome to your audience. And then the floor is open for your discussion. And as the discussion is going on, we will be accepting questions from the audience. If we have a little pause that you don't have any questions, we have some pre-generated questions here that will be beneficial for everybody. So if I don't hear from you, I will be asking the panelists one of these questions, and then you'll be able to listen, and then we all benefit from that. So panelists, you take it away.
Well, again, I'm Jose Ramirez. I'm with Gartner, and I focus primarily on research for workforce development, organizational development of the IT workforce, so how to upskill your workforce. And a big topic that that we're receiving a lot at Gartner is how do we upskill or start to think about building programs for upskilling in AI technologies, because we know we are anticipating that most of the roles in technology are going to be impacted, if not all, are going to be impacted by AI. And we're talking about every role in IT, from if you're responsible for help desk, all the way up to data analytics, software. Of course, we know that it's already impacting software engineering or developing roles. And we could talk a little bit more about how it's going to be impacted. But one of the things that really stood out to me from the keynote from Seamus is one of the quotes that said, AI is not going to replace jobs, it's going to augment jobs. And according to Gartner research, we're backing that up. It actually is going to augment, especially in IT. I can speak for IT roles. AI is going to augment jobs. It's not going to replace them. Now, how it's going to augment them, it depends on a role right now. In the next 3 years, for some roles like help desk, it can be up to 50% augmented. For other roles like cloud computing, it's closer to 30-20%. And of course, I'll love to get, if you have any questions around how we should be thinking about and preparing for that impact, happy to answer those questions. But
hi everyone, my name's Amy Sprung. I work at Microsoft.
this AI thing has been a little bit of a big thing for us this year. And I completely agree that workforce is one of those topics that comes up in every conversation I have with all different kinds of roles and people across state government. And so you may or may not know that LinkedIn is also part of Microsoft, and so we benefit from a lot of the data that LinkedIn has a view into. They have sort of a unique perspective on the workforce because of all the data that we give it about what our jobs are, what the skills are that we're looking for, even some of the learning that we do. And so they released a report, it's back in November, which sort of feels a little bit old, but some of the data points are interesting, and there's a great little table in there in the report. But they noticed that on LinkedIn alone, in the first few months, they saw an increase of 70% of mentions of AI across conversations across the site. That it's popping up in more and more job descriptions, more and more skills. And so the need for people to increase skills for every job, as Jose was mentioning, sort of that will be augmented is necessary. I mentioned, and so I will, by the way, I'll link all of these reports, anything that I mentioned, I'll link it to my LinkedIn, so you can find them after the fact. But there's a great little table in there that talks about basically different industries, and it breaks it down whether the jobs will be augmented, disrupted, or insulated. And so on the insulated side, we think about jobs like construction and nurses, where they might be able to take advantage of AI in some great ways, but the reality is we still need nurses and construction workers to do their jobs. On the other side, as Jose mentioned, some of the technology and media jobs will be augmented, the word's disrupted. And so it's interesting to sort of think about different roles in different industries and how they fit. The other piece I wanted to share, there's another report that Microsoft just released. We have a blog that is called the Work Trends Index that uses the data that we see because of all of the people using our tools and sort of how they're using our tools. And generally, and so they report on interesting trends, and of course AI is a big focus. And so the report there says that 75% of knowledge workers are using AI, and there's an interesting trend that probably Gene's not super excited to hear this, but that even if you don't have access to it, there's a trend that people are using it anyway, right? They call it BYO AI, bring your own AI. And so people, because we have it on our phones and we have it in our pockets, and so there's some good data points like that. So I have more to share, but I'll start there.
Yeah, this is wonderful. Hi, everybody. I'm Kathleen Mulch. I am a managing partner at Cognilytica. We're an AI-focused research advisory and education firm, and we've been around for almost a decade now. So I always say I have been following AI since before Gen AI made it very popular. And so, we talk to people all the time, and we're really focused at Cognilytica on, we started out as like a boutique analyst firm, so I feel the Gartner strength very much on this panel. And we were tracking the markets, and we've really seen how AI has evolved. And we've also seen how people are now thinking about and using artificial intelligence. So, we say it really is in the hands of everybody now with generative AI. And so how are you going to learn? And, based on questions, some very great questions that we had earlier, people are concerned and interested and curious about how AI is going to impact them. So at Cognilytica, we have produced a lot of research on many different areas with this. So when we talk about artificial intelligence, it really is this umbrella term. And people talk about AI, but what does it mean, right? There is no commonly accepted definition of AI, so how can we really be talking about it and understanding? So at Cognilytica, what we did is we said, let's break it down one level deeper and talk about the 7 patterns of AI, so that when we're talking about AI, maybe you're talking about an autonomous vehicle, which, hey, I'm still bullish on one of these days, so I never have to drive again. Not looking great, but I'm still hopeful. Or you may be talking about an AI-enabled chatbot. I may be talking about generative AI, right? Large language models. We're all talking about AI, but it's not the same. And the users are going to be different. The algorithms, if you're building this model from scratch, is going to be different. The data that you need is different. So we said, let's break this down one level deeper. We talk about the 7 patterns of AI. So it's hyper-personalization, treating each individual as an individual. It's the recognition pattern. So we think about all the data that we have at our organizations. I mean, how much data does Gartner have? How much data does Microsoft have? Most of that's unstructured data. So we say this isn't going to be easily queryable, but you can make so many great insights from that unstructured data. So now we can use a recognition pattern to help us do that. An example in that pattern would be facial recognition, for example. But again, you have a lot of unstructured data. How do you make sense of that? And then we have predictive analytics. So this is where we talk about augmented intelligence, where we're not replacing the human, but we're helping them do their job better. We can take past or current data to help augment that human. We have the autonomous pattern, so that's going to be autonomous vehicles, right, and other things where the goal is to fully remove the human from the loop. That's an incredibly, incredibly hard pattern. So when we talk about automation and we talk about intelligence, they are different, but so that's how we like to break it down. So that, I think, also helps frame when you're thinking about, how is this going to impact the workforce? How is this going to impact me? Think about how you will use AI. Okay.
That's great. It is good that we have researchers here in AI, and then particularly talking about workforce development. So I have a few questions. I know you will ask questions. We have a little time here. Well, let me just ask a few questions to get us started. Maybe it can also inspire your questions. So when we talk about AI, we're talking about the participation of women, gender equality and things like that. So how can we ensure equitable opportunities for women in AI? And what initiatives or programs have been successful in promoting gender diversity and inclusion in that field? Can anybody pick it up there?
Sure. So I think, again, when we talk about artificial intelligence, right, it's who's going to be building these and who's going to be using these. And I think everybody has the ability to use these. You just have to get comfortable with it. We talk a lot about fears and concerns related to artificial intelligence. A few years ago, RPA, robotic process automation, a lot of people were calling that gateway to AI. Now really it's generative AI, and in particular large language models. So I encourage everybody to get out there, practice it. We really say that there is no failure when it comes to prompt engineering using these large language models. So get out there, feel empowered, and ask others. What's nice is that prompts are, they're not really proprietary, right? So ask other people. We have something that, some organizations are doing this, some aren't right now, but we are encouraging people to do this. We call it hack and track. So you keep track of all of the prompts that you've been using and on what platform and the date that you've used it, because you know that these models are constantly changing and evolving. So get out there and ask and do this. Panels like this are great to help, showcase what everybody is doing. Go to different events, see what others are doing, but really feel empowered. And especially when it comes to using AI, not just building AI, this really is in the hands of everybody. And so don't be afraid.
Yeah, I'll pile on that. I think historically a lot of the technology fields have been predominantly men. And so the opportunity that AI presents, where all of a sudden some of these technology jobs become far more accessible. A lot of the coding and development work that's been done in the past, as we advance AI, is going to become much more accessible. You'll be able to use natural language to code apps and to code programming, do programming and things like that. And so my hope is that some of these tools become much more accessible to a more diverse population. So whether it's gender or race and ethnicity, I think the biggest diversity angle or sort of benefit that I've seen so far is around accessibility, especially for people with disabilities. So not to pivot too far, but there are some fantastic applications of AI that are really enabling people who are vision impaired, people who are hearing impaired, people who have lost their voice for one reason or another, and really facilitating their participation in the workforce. And I think that in a way that we've been sort of only using a portion of the workforce, if all of a sudden we can truly access both genders, or all genders, I should say, and as well as people from more diverse races, I think it helps to fill some of the jobs that we've been trying to fill for many years.
And I'll add from the upskilling perspective, think about, there was a time that you had to go to an establishment like a university to get a computer science degree to be a technologist. And now you can be for women in IT who also have childcare responsibilities can now take on learning opportunities at home through resources that are now available. You mentioned LinkedIn, like for instance, LinkedIn Learning, but there's other platforms that now exist that have workspaces or what is known as labs where you can now practice how to code at home using a virtual environment without having necessarily to spend the money or the time to take on learning. But what I wanted to also talk about, so there's that angle of upskilling. There's HR technologies that are now being built, like the internal talent marketplace. Do anyone know what the internal talent marketplace is or have heard of it before? Because what it is usually is used within the organization to identify internal opportunities. So if there's projects that you need to do and you don't have the talent to do those projects, what an internal talent marketplace does is they identify individuals. They may be outside of your team, but they may have a certain skill to help you fulfill that project. Now think about this, AI, because oftentimes when we think of AI, we have to be aware of the bias, right? Whoever's building the platform has to ensure that there's no bias in the platform. But there's also an opportunity to identify who in the organization has not had the opportunities to work on projects. Because oftentimes it's always the same individuals that are working on the projects, and those are the individuals that continue to get promoted and have visibility, and oftentimes they're not women that are offered some of those opportunities or projects. So AI can automatically identify who doesn't, regardless of gender, who doesn't have the right opportunities or opportunities to work on certain projects through an internal talent marketplace, and immediately tell the hiring manager or the project owner, this is your talent pool, right? So now it provides the equal playing field, right? So for everyone.
Yeah, that was great. I think this next question is good that we have Kathleen and Amy here, and they will serve as inspiration for this question here. It says, what are unique challenges faced by women pursuing careers in AI? And I will extend it to technology, not just AI. And how can we address these barriers to foster greater representation and advancement?
I think it starts in K-12. It starts in school. We have to do I've been working on this for a long time, and I still feel like we have a long way to go. We have to do better of getting young women and diverse students engaged in technology, interested in technology earlier on. I think the first step that we've done a really good job of in the last 10 or 15 years is making computer science available in high schools more equitably. And I think AI, cybersecurity, there are all of these spaces where we need to be able to introduce those topics. I have a high school student, and I'll say sometimes those classes aren't super welcoming still to diverse populations, girls, things like that. So I think we still have a long way to go, but I do think that it starts earlier. I think a big piece of it is mentorship and making sure that girls see themselves in people in the profession. And so as the community of women and community of diverse people grow in technology, I think making sure that we bring those people back to meet young people so that they see a little bit of themselves in the hiring. And then lastly, I think in industry, I think we have a role, there's a role that we can play. We can't hire people in one-off places. I think we have to also do more to support them once they come to our companies, meaning when women come as a group, especially young women, making sure that there's a cohort of young women that they can get to know. If it's a diverse population, making sure, again, that they see others that look like themselves and that they feel included. And I think it's something that schools have sort of figured out, but maybe in corporate we haven't quite. We do it in pockets, but we could do a better job of it.
Yeah, those are great points. I was on another panel recently about women in AI, and the same question was brought up. And what was interesting is, you're right, start young. You have to start them early, and you have to let them feel empowered throughout their journey. Research has shown around grade 3, when girls, young girls in elementary school, start to feel that gap, right, between the STEM subjects. And then by 4th and 5th grade, they feel less empowered if they haven't been in it to continue on, and then there becomes an even further drop-off. So I think start young. Also, representation matters, and it's incredibly important. So an example that I had brought up, which is related, is, people of my generation, for the most part, when you think about a doctor, you usually think about a man. Even though there's a lot of female doctors, I have female doctors, I still think about that. Doc McStuffins is a girl doctor. My children were brought up with that. And you may say, okay, this is funny, but representation matters. Now when we talk about doctors at my house, we talk about female doctors. How can this be translated into all different areas of STEM? Continue to have representation, continue to show that girls and women should and can and are a part of the conversation and should have a seat at that technology table.
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
So from a workforce development standpoint, how do you, as a panel, what are your thoughts on addressing people who believe AI is going to take their job, it's going to replace them? What does that look and feel like for you?
So we get asked that question a lot. This comes down to fears and concerns related to AI. So we always go back to, what is AI? What can it do? What can it do? And it really comes from the top down too. So at organizations, senior leadership needs to say, we are going to use AI to help augment, which is not replacing your job. And it really needs to start from the top. You have to have buy-in. You have to really continue to hone that message, because no matter how hard you try, people do have fears around artificial intelligence, and you can't belittle those fears, because then that just makes it worse. So you need to embrace those fears, address them, and then say, this is why we're using this technology, this is how it's going to help augment our workforce. Yet what we always say is, AI may be, it's not a job killer. A few years ago we said AI is not a job killer, but it's a job category killer. Now there's another quote that says, AI is not going to replace your job, but somebody that uses AI is going to replace your job. So you have to embrace the technology. You have to upskill your employees, let them feel comfortable with this technology, and then say, and now this is how we're going to use it. So yes, some of the tasks that you do may go away, but you weren't hired to do some of these tasks. Like data entry, for example, if that's 80% of your job, but that wasn't really what you were hired to do, now you can actually do what you were hired to do and use some of that subject matter expertise that you have.
Yeah, 100%. And I think we have to sort of create that culture of lifelong learning and foster upskilling and encourage people to take on the skills. I completely agree. I think an example that I often reference is teachers, and that when we think about how this could impact a teacher's role, experience in their job, they spend a lot of time writing reports, right? Especially our special ed teachers, for all of the IEP requirements and stuff like that. What if all of a sudden all of our IEP teachers, special ed teachers, can lean on AI to do a first draft of those IEP reports. The teachers can review them and submit them. We fulfill the legal requirements, but it opens up their day to spend more time with students. I think you can make a similar case for police officers and some of the reporting that they spend time doing. We, of course, have to make sure there's always a human in the loop. That's what Microsoft always talks. There's always a human involved. It's not about the AI creating the report and submitting it and be done. It's about doing that first draft, which, I don't know about you, that takes me the longest, and it's much easier to edit something. So I think helping think about how these skills are going to sort of augment people's jobs so that they can be more strategic, so they can use their skills and the things that they were hired for and spend more time on their students, their constituents, things like that.
And to add on to both of what you're saying, because Kathleen, right, the quote now is, you're not going to be replaced by AI, you're going to be replaced by somebody that knows AI. That's what you should really be thinking about and start to develop AI skills. Now, you don't have to be an expert in all of that. As Kathleen mentioned before, there's so many elements of AI. Generative AI is a subset of that. But I like to think about it as there was a time where we all had to learn how to use email, right? There was a time where we all had to learn how to use Microsoft Teams effectively, right? And do collaborative, asynchronous collaboration without having to hit that save button, right? And that took time to learn. But the AI is going to be the same thing, right? It's going to be part of your job. And to give you a specific example, think about the other element that I wanted to mention that hasn't been discussed yet is that there's an aging workforce. It's going to be even more difficult to hire great talent in the next 5, even 10 years, or even sooner, because there's just not going to be enough talent. A lot of people are retiring, and there's not a lot of people to replace individuals, especially for those really key areas in IT and technology. So instead of trying to hire from a bigger pool of candidates, let's say you're looking for a product manager or even a help desk technician or sysadmin with these specific skills from your job descriptions that were probably written 20 years ago and never changed. I'm just kidding. Everyone, yeah, or not. Imagine now, I'll use the help desk technician as an example. The skills can be troubleshooting, scripting, Active Directory, and problem solving. Imagine now, you don't need to hire. AI can replace maybe the scripting piece, and now you're focused on individuals with problem solving skills. Because even though AI can start to do some problem solving skills, you still, as we mentioned, you still have to keep a human in the loop. Critical thinking, we did a recent study at Gartner for infrastructure operations role in IT, including all the skills that are most important. The most important skill for infrastructure and operations was not a technical skill. It was critical thinking. So people are still hiring for critical thinking skills, still focusing on that. Now you can reduce from, now I only have 200 people to hire from, especially being public sector, which maybe is even smaller, unless you're offering high compensation. We know that's the struggle, right? Compensation, fully remote opportunities. That's what you're competing against, people that are receiving those value propositions. But now instead of hiring from that large pool of candidates, or from the small pool of candidates, it just increases that pool of candidates because now you're hiring for individuals that maybe have a lower proficiency in Active Directory or scripting, but really good problem solving, troubleshooting skills. And they are great candidates to hire for. So you shouldn't be afraid, right, of AI replacing.
I'm Cam Red. I work for the Department of Public Works and Transportation. And it's kind of a two-part question. One, I think there are a lot of obvious ways you can apply AI, like in HR and help desk and things like that. But for more of our hands-on roles, how do we not leave those people behind? The people who don't even really need to check their email that often because they're working on potholes or, cleaning up our community. So how do we integrate it but not forget them? And do you have any suggestions on how we can integrate it with those kind of roles as well?
I think more and more we're seeing we need to figure out training plans by role, right? I mean, so at Microsoft, I know, we work a lot with procurement officers, we work with attorneys. The kind of training that they need around AI is there's basic skills, but then the way they will apply it is different. And so I think we need to be thinking about how we're preparing people. There's an organization called Innovate.us that's specifically building training for public sector employees. They have a whole host of free workshops on their website, and they're building more of a catalog. They're starting with some of those basic skills, and there will be more coming. But what I like about it is that it really is, it's talking about AI from the lens of public service. So that's one place, and I think that they are starting to think about those role-specific kinds of tools. I think that even the hands-on, the bus drivers and people like that, just like we've seen an increasing use of email and Teams and stuff like that for roles like that, I think that generative AI can still play a role in terms of if they need information, how they, even internally, we're seeing a lot of departments sort of build out essentially a chat bot that helps people find that information faster. Information that's probably on a website or a SharePoint site somewhere, or probably some other technology that I don't know because I work at Microsoft. But searching that stuff sometimes is hard. I think generative AI and some of this chatbot functionality is going to make it easier for people to find information. Even to your point, like HR, how do I say I'm going on vacation or something, like, or request vacation, things like that. So I think we have to be thinking about how we prepare all these different roles for AI and really be thoughtful about how they're going to interact with it. But also maybe you want to give them opportunities for upskilling to learn more. And so we need a plan, which I think is part of the executive order, and some of the things that you're seeing coming out of the county executive too, creating some of the professional development opportunities.
And I think when we talk about AI, right, we always think about it from the 7 patterns of AI. And so maybe they already are using AI for part of their job with, directions, for example, right? I mean, that's already integrated. What generative AI has done is it's put it in your hands. So now you feel that you're actually using AI, where before you were, but it was in the background. Even with HR, even with help desk, I could be talking with the chatbot. I'm not sure if it's a human or not. So it could be AI, and now I'm interacting and I'm using AI. So that's what you need to say. You need to say, how are we going to be using and interacting with AI, and then how are they going to actually be, building or prompt engineering with AI? And these are 2 different, aspects to look at it. So they, somebody that is filling a pothole can be using artificial intelligence. Maybe they can take a picture of it, and it can help them figure out how best to fill it or help them to not use as much material. So we have to think about how we want to actually use it and apply it. And so we're not just talking about that generative AI, we're not just talking about prompt engineering, which maybe they're not doing on a daily basis, but that doesn't mean that they're not using AI on a daily basis.
Yeah, I'll be brief with mine because it's some of the because that's a great question, because some of the best ideas will probably not come from those experts in AI. They're going to come from those that are in the front line doing the work. And at minimum, right, providing AI fundamental training. It doesn't have to be technical training, but foundations is what some platforms are calling it. Which Seamus mentioned, right? That book, that resource book, that just gives you a high-level overview of AI. Everyone should know at least what it is, and encourage them that, as Kathleen mentioned, that's a great example, encourage them that maybe there's a way they could use the technology to identify a more proficient or more productive way of doing their work.
Oh, maybe stand up. Good morning. My name is Renee Holden. I am with the Prince George's County Police Department, and I run the Records Management Division. I get a lot of requests for, I see you smiling, body cam footage, dash cam footage, public records. Can you explain to me or give me some kind of idea, how is AI going to assist me? How is it going to assist me and my crew with getting this information out to the public, with being transparent, and also getting it out in a timely manner?
So again, it comes down to what you're trying to do. So are you trying to go through reports and be able to pull specific reports? So maybe you could use natural language processing to help identify what reports maybe have certain words in them. With cameras, I know also there's a lot of redacting that needs to get done, so you can use artificial intelligence to help with that. There's some companies out there that do that. So it depends. I always say, what problem are you trying to solve? And then we say, is AI the right solution for that? And if so, then how do you move forward? So always, what problem are you trying to solve? And then you have to know what AI can and cannot do. We always go back to the 7 patterns. And then from there, you can figure it out. So with records, for example, if you need to, cull through all the records, how can you use natural language processing for that? Recognition pattern with video imaging, you can do that. It just depends on what it is that you're trying to do. And then figure out how it can augment, right? We never wanted to replace fully the human. You're always going to have an eye in there to check on it, but you say, how can I augment what we're doing? So, and then we want to measure it, right? So, because this isn't going to be free. So what's your return on investment? Are you trying to save hours of work? Are you trying to save, an employee so that you don't need to hire as many people? And then figure out how you can apply AI for that.
No, I was just going to mention, I'm by no means an AI expert. I am a workforce development expert, so I'll answer it in a workforce development approach. But I do cover AI in terms of how it's going to impact the workforce, and going back to the understanding of those that are using or wanting that information, if they can give you those answers, right? But they have to understand how it works. Right, and it could be predicting, because one of the great things about a lot of the data that you have with body cams and with the data that's been now being recorded by your department is that how do we use that data wisely and actually use it to predict if an event can happen, right? But going back to that AI fundamentals training for your workforce.
I'm guessing that some of the challenge that you might have is, and I've seen this with other governments that we've worked with. In some cases, we've talked about it in terms of residents needing services, right? So when they receive services from a county or from the state, they have to provide a certain amount of background or documentation permission to, and so I imagine some of your process is about gathering, there's probably a bunch of checklists that you have to collect before you even hand over the footage. And that creates a lot of back and forth because inevitably people don't provide the right thing. I mean, permitting is another example of this too, right? They think, every electrician thinks they're providing all the things that they need to get a particular permit, but every city's a little bit different and they might need different things. So when people are requesting that kind of footage, I think one possible scenario, we could spend a whole day brainstorming how AI could help you, but off the cuff, I think AI could help with that back and forth gathering in a way that it's not just a static form where people are kind of guessing what you can have a conversation with the rules, the guidelines of what needs to be submitted here in a chatbot fashion so that by the time you receive it, you have all the information. And so instead of going back and forth and spending multiple instances with a particular case or a particular request, you hopefully have all the information you need to make a good decision when you get there. So again, that's where the human interacts. So it helps you to do your job more efficiently without, it's not making any decisions on your behalf.
And real quick, so from the county perspective, great question. And so what I want to do, not to plug for Microsoft, but to that point, we've been hiding it, so I apologize in advance. Like 3 people in this room know what I'm going to say. But we are in the process, final stages of procuring an AI system that's going to help with MPIA and FOIA requests, to your very point. So Ms. Crystal Queen, if you don't know her, she's going to be leading some of that. But to your exact point, doing the redaction for faces, license plates, and the manual stuff and everything for written notes. So that's one thing that we're already doing, because when I started with the county, there was a bunch of disparate agencies and FOIA systems. And so this is our opportunity as a county to make it one and bring everybody together and use that AI system. So I just wanted to do that plug. Apologies, I'm gonna sit back down. No, ma'am.
We got you.
Thank you so much. My name is Rita Lassiter. I work with the Prince George's County Council, so that's the legislative branch of government, and I work in the Office of Communications. And in my role, I manage our website. And once upon a time, I was also a constituent services specialist for a county council member. So I'm always thinking about how to provide information in the best way possible, the easiest way possible, and what's the quickest way I can get a constituent to that information. So for us as the Office of Communications for the council, I'm always thinking about, okay, what if they have questions about legislation? How can I get them to the web page where they can sign up for a public hearing? What does that look like in our newsletter format, right? To make sure that people are getting the information about legislations, about committee meetings, things of that nature. And then on top of that, we've also been having conversations about language accessibility and our level of engagement from our office, the council offices, administrative side, about how many interactions are you having with non-language speaking constituents or limited language speaking constituents. So all of that said, I'm thinking about accessibility and what that might look like, how AI can be incorporated into all that. I hope that makes sense.
I can speak. So one of the awesome features of our tools is that you can ask it. So let's say you set it up with the budget or legislation. That's a great demo, because a lot of times bills to the average person are a little confusing. And so you can point an AI tool to, I'll say Microsoft Copilot, for example, to a particular piece of legislation, to the budget, and you can ask it questions. You can start, so you're just using natural language to ask how much money was allocated to the police department for body cameras for the upcoming fiscal year compared to last year. You can do cool comparisons and things like that, especially because all that information is publicly available. You can then, in the same conversation, flip to asking the question in Spanish, and it will respond in Spanish. And so it's still a digital translator. We all know that some of those there are shortcomings. My feeling is it's better than not having anything, and so I don't know offhand, Michael, do you know how many languages we're doing now? 140 plus languages, so that's pretty good. So I think from an accessibility standpoint, that's a great example of one of the spaces where AI is going to help us do it better than we could do it on our own. We could do it before AI existed.
I think also it comes down to, what problem are you solving, right? And what do you want to do to get them to help? And so we always say, well, maybe start with the most frequently asked question or start with the most frequently asked section. New York City recently released a chatbot and got into a lot of trouble because what's very tempting now is to just put a chatbot on your website, use a large language model, and have it be able to answer hundreds of thousands of questions in multiple different languages, and then it gets it wrong. What do you do? So they had a chatbot that was helping with, I think, tenant laws, because it's very complex, right? Finding all this information on websites can be confusing, and it was actually giving illegal information about Section 8 housing and, who you needed to let apply and not apply, and so it got into a lot of trouble. So we always say it's never a set it and forget it. What the U.S. Postal Service did, which was a great example of, we always say think big, start small, and iterate often, is they said, what is the number one question that we get asked? And we want to reduce call center volume. So what's the number one question that we get asked? Can anybody guess? U.S. Postal Service? Track a package, right? Track a package. So they said, then we're just going to have our chatbot answer that. They were able to measure the reduction in call center volume, And then they were able to see how many people were using the chatbot. And they said, okay, this is a success. Now let's go to question number 2 that we get asked most frequently. And then question number 3. So you don't need to say, if I want to have a chatbot, for example, it has to be able to answer 10,000 questions right off the bat. Just have it answer questions that you're getting most frequently asked, and then continue to grow from there, because then you can measure it and make sure that people are using it. If you have questions, right, we talked about pilots, put it in pilots. See if how people are interacting with it. If there's certain questions, maybe figure out what languages people are asking, and then really focus on just the top, 2 or 3 different languages.
So we've got about 20 minutes left, and what I wanted to do was give the panelists a chance to speak on something they're passionate about with workforce development that maybe we haven't covered here yet. So I'm going to put you on the spot, but I think that'll be, unless there's any questions, I think, really would like to hear your thoughts on that.
It's a great question because as a Gartner analyst, you have to be passionate about this subject. In general, is a requirement of the role because that's all I talk about, and I don't do anything else but talk about workforce development. So I love it. So I love all of it. But if I were to pick, it's definitely the upskilling initiative or topic. And I talk a lot about how to attract talent. That last question was a great question because it was referring to your mission, because you certainly don't want to, and I mentioned before, right, you have challenges in attracting talent because you may not be able to offer the best compensation, but you have to really rely on your purpose and your mission, because you definitely don't want to be the agency that says we can't help you, right? And attracting the right talent that understands your purpose is a great, people that believe in your mission, that's who you want. That's who you want. And you can develop them through upskilling initiatives. And in our recent survey, we found that, and again, this is the IT perspective, the number 1 tactic to close the skills gap is upskilling your current employees and reskilling your current employees. Now, how do we do this effectively? The choice, the way you do this is not through traditional week-long kind of training sessions. Those are still great, but it's often considered time away from the job, and we have to approach learning as it's a mindset shift, that learning is part of the job, not time away from the job. And learning needs to be agile. How do we incorporate learning throughout the day? Is by making it small, by making it accessible, micro-learning, and creating a learning culture. And you start by creating a learning culture by doing it yourselves, too. I believe it was Dwayne in the opening mentioned he took a course on Coursera. Openly said he learned on Coursera. Your leadership is learning, right? And that tells that your workforce, they're more open to learn because they're always seeing what you're doing. They're always seeing, wait, I want to see what my leaders are doing. If they're telling me to learn and they're not learning, then I'm less likely, right, to learn. And there are a lot of great resources out there. Coursera, right, is being one of them. I have to mention LinkedIn Learning, because Amy's next to me. No, I'm just kidding. But in IT, Pluralsight is another one that we often hear, Udemy, and Skillsoft. And I mentioned those in particular because those are the ones that are offering AI foundational learning for all proficiency levels.
Yeah, I'll pile on. So continuing the commercial on LinkedIn, there's actually some free learning that all accrues to a certificate. So that's nice. You can add that to your LinkedIn profile. There's two different career paths, or two different learning paths. One's on career essentials using generative AI, and the other one is productivity with generative AI. There are thousands of generative AI courses on LinkedIn. What I love about this is it just maps out like 3 or 4, just a few to get you started, and then it'll recommend other courses that you can pursue after that, but it's a great place to get started. And then we mentioned the innovate.us content also is another great place to get started. They have a bunch of different workshops featuring different speakers from different state and local governments. They have different vendors come and speak. We did a couple, but also other companies like Amazon and Google have also presented there too. So it gives you a broader cross-section.
Yeah. And I think these are great perspectives to add on to this. When it comes to workforce development, we always like to think about the workforce now and the workforce of the future, because how are we going to be educating the younger generation and have them feel empowered when it comes to artificial intelligence, right? People talked earlier about how are we going to bring this into elementary schools and K through 12 to teach these children. I have 2 young daughters that are in elementary school right now, and I think about what does this look like? So at Cognilytica, we have said, what does an AI-enabled vision of the future look like? And we need to be encompassing all different aspects. One of this is an AI-enhanced organization. Another one is, originally we said autonomous everything, but we've made that augmented everything because we really are using AI as an augmented tool. So when we think about augmented intelligence, it's not replacing humans, but helping them do their jobs better. How am I able to do this now? One of the patterns of AI I talked about is hyper-personalization. So this is treating each individual as an individual. No longer do I need to be bucketed into groups and categories. So initially you go, well, that's a marketer's dream, right? I'm going to be able to hit the right person at the right time with the right message. But how do we take this one level further and say, but how can I have hyper-personalized education? How can I have hyper-personalized finance or hyper-personalized healthcare? And when it comes to hyper-personalized education, this is a lifelong journey, right? And we are told now, especially at a young age, embrace this growth mindset. I don't know things yet. That doesn't mean that I can't know things. We talk about fear and concerns related to AI. Don't be fearful of this technology, right? Really learn. But how can I have this hyper-personalized experience throughout my entire journey and my entire career, so that it starts, we can say this starts at the elementary school level and it continues to work the way up. When you have that mindset, then you do approach learning and say, this isn't a chore, this is something that I'm excited about, this is something that I want to do. Go out and seek, and so, you can have LinkedIn Learning or different, learning platforms recommend these different courses to you, but now it's going to recommend it on that personalized level. It's going to see where your, gaps are and then get you up to speed, because not everybody learns the same way. Not everybody learns the same time, the same pace. Maybe I need to have something repeated to me 3 times before it actually sinks in, or, maybe you only need it once. Now I can have that hyper-personalized experience, and that's how I think we need to be thinking about kind of that workforce development as well, where, yes, we can talk about how we can impact the workforce now, but how do we also impact that workforce of the future? What does it look like 5, 10, 20 years from now, especially as we have augmented intelligence with us?
Nobody else? Oh, another person.
Good afternoon. My name is Olivia Wilson. I am a career coach with Employ Prince George's for our Youth Career Connections program. So your question was, your answer or comment was really great. I am a mom of a toddler and a preschooler, so I would like to know more information on how AI can empower them in the future and how I can start now as a mom. And also, as a career coach, I will be going into a middle and high school and providing the students with different, resources on how to get into their college and career path. But I know AI will be a great tool and help. I actually use AI in college to help me, like paraphrase, rephrase my essays. Is super essential. But I'm not going to, go into the schools like, hey, use AI. So if you guys can give me some insight on how I can help them, navigate towards AI, and it can assist them with, preparing for graduation or passing classes and courses and things like that.
So, when it comes to that, so really we're talking about generative AI and how can they get better with prompt engineering, for example. So we always say, ask others what they're doing and learn the art of the possible. And when it comes to prompt engineering, the soft skills that we talked about are really coming back into favor. So creative thinking, critical thinking, communication is also one of those soft skills. How can you be a better communicator? Because you need to do that for prompting. So think about, from that perspective. And so you're saying, well, how can it help them prepare for graduation? You can ask it different questions, and you can learn from others too. Maybe have different groups come together and say, okay, now let's all brainstorm how we can use this, and let's all kind of get our laptops out and figure this out together and learn from others. Because this should be collaborative, and we say, this you really do need to learn from others. As far as teaching kids young, just don't let them be afraid, right? Get in there, learn it yourself, figure out how you can teach it at that young age, and then continue to move on with it. So for example, with me, one of my children is a proficient reader, and one of them we're getting to proficiency. And so, okay, well, let's just play around with the tool. Also, another thing that we love is AI-enabled music generation. So how can you just get out there, help your kids create some lyrics, then you put some music to it, use these AI tools, and get them familiar with it. Get them excited about it, and don't let them fear it.
I love that, because now we're getting into the motivation aspect, because there are a lot of tools out there that, or if we approach young adults or even children, learn technology or learn AI, first they're probably going to look at us and say, why, or this sounds boring. But as Kathleen mentioned, right, there's some music I use, I think it's called Moises, is where you can eliminate tracks and you can practice just by downloading a song to it. Eliminate the vocals and I can practice singing. I'm not going to do that here, but but that motivates, that motivates and children to just get interested in technology. And the only other thing I wanted to add is, because you mentioned about the career, it's really important, and I hope this is a great insight, not just for you, but for everyone here. When we're talking to the next generation about careers, it's time to stop talking about career ladders and start talking about career portfolios. And what I mean by that is when we're looking at the traditional career path, like I'm going to, become a network engineer. That is a career path. But in 10 years or 5 years is probably not going to be around. And I'm not going to say that specific role. So any network engineers here, don't be afraid. But I'm saying any role, whether it's in IT or outside of IT, jobs change so fast that what we really need to think about is portfolios. Start to think about what are the small projects you can do and build out your portfolio so you're always prepared and you can have multiple career paths. So when you're having those discussions with students, say, what are the multiple career paths that you're interested in, and start to build that portfolio so you're always ready.
I know, force of habit. I think some of the things that came to mind when you were speaking are about sort of how we teach young people about responsible AI and sort of where to take it. We at Microsoft think a lot about responsible use of AI, and I think there's been a fair amount of controversy of how we want to see AI used or not used in K through 12 especially. It seems like higher education is embracing it a little more intentionally, but those are older students and it's a different conversation. And so I think just like we teach our kids not to cheat on a test, we teach them to be responsible about how they use AI. Figure out what is the use policy in your school district, in your state, and understand how they can use it. I have 2 high school age kids, and so I find they use it a lot when they get stuck, but and they've dabbled in how much they can use it for their writing and how much they can't. And I think it's a good exercise. We want them to learn how to use it, but learn how to use it responsibly. So how do you give it to them in ways that just like with everything else, that they have a chance to figure it out without, stepping in it and sort of making big mistakes and stuff. The other, there's this awesome blogger and podcaster named Ethan Mollick. He's a professor at University of Pennsylvania. His wife is a K-12 teacher, and they do some podcasts and YouTube sessions sort of together sometimes. And they talk a lot about the impact of AI on education, and they're entertaining. And some of it, it's helped me a lot think about where it's appropriate in K through 12 versus higher ed and sort of in different applications. And so they're a great resource too.
Well,
Hi, I'm with the county's Office of Homeland Security as the cyber preparedness specialist. And I know like the 4 main attacks for AI: poisoning, evasion, privacy, and abuse. And I love where we're going, but also I always have to kind of take that step back and go and ask, how are we ensuring security for this? Especially when, we're teaching people to run. And monitoring, I know, is a key part. What advice would you provide for that?
I'm looking for Eugene because he's probably better to answer this for your account. There he is. He's hiding in the back there. So the biggest thing that I would say, that's a whole separate session probably, and I'm happy to chat after. The biggest thing that we look at is the difference between the AI that you use in ChatGPT, even Bing Chat, what's now called Copilot, the consumer facing, right? Stuff that's available publicly. Between that kind of AI and the tools, there's probably different categories in your 7 levels. I need to study that and talk to that better. But and the enterprise tools. So when you start using tools like Copilot that's integrated with Office or Azure OpenAI for the enterprise, all of that is going to be secured within your enterprise and will take advantage of all the cybersecurity practices that are embedded in all of our other products. And so I think whether you're using Microsoft or not, the lesson is to help people differentiate between when they're using, Copilot app on their phone or a Google tool on their phone from the tools that they're using in an enterprise for work, and think about when you're sharing data. So that if you're asking for a summary of a piece of legislation that's publicly available, do that publicly, that's great, or a song or whatever, you can do that in the public tools. But if you want to use AI to play with a document that is private, or better yet, data about constituents, all of that should be done within enterprise software.
Yeah, and I think it's important to understand too, you want to play around. So we have 2 aspects, right? So one, what are we putting in to some of these, prompts that we're doing, and how are we uploading data? What data are we uploading? So that's one side of it. But a lot of these generative AI tools are getting embedded into technology now, and I have to use it whether or not I have a choice. What happens if there's a vulnerability? What do? You're screwed. So we say you should be documenting all of your AI applications so that if something happens, you know exactly who and what technology you're using. And it gets hard because it is embedded in everything, and you don't always have that choice of whether or not you want it. It's like, sorry, it's in there. And people may not know that. So you have to educate people and say, hey, this is now being incorporated in. These are the security potential vulnerabilities that we have. These are things you absolutely can't do. And I think this is a continual, ongoing conversation. I know a lot of times organizations, I had to go through this as well. You had that 1 or every 2-year real boring security training. And it's like, make it more fun because people need to know about this, or it's going to majorly impact you in ways that you don't know. So, how can you kind of continue, we talk about, right, continuing education, keep things fun, make people want to be engaged. How can we continue to educate the workforce with what's going on? And it's hard. I mean, these tools are changing like daily sometimes, and things are getting incorporated you may not know, but just do your best to stay on top of it and do your best to continue to educate everybody, because if something happens, it could be a real major security impact.
Yeah, we could talk about, right, I won't talk about security awareness training, but to Kathleen's point, right, because people they receive this all the time. But one key thing that I will share is storytelling. Is this is the time to start to improve your storytelling, to share stories like there's an organization. This is a true story. An organization that someone in accounting received a meeting invite from the executive leadership team, and she joins the Zoom meeting, and there was the CEO, and the CFO telling her to transfer money, $25 million to this account. And she did it because she saw their video, and she didn't realize that later she found out that it was a deep fake video, and the hackers were really good at creating this real life video of the CEO telling an employee to do something. She's not going to say no to the CEO, but it requires that knowing how to identify deep fake videos. But I just shared a story. There's a lot of stories that you can find and share, and I recommend all of you, in addition to your security awareness training that we talked about, add stories to influence individuals to be more secure with the how they use AI.
Last question here.
All righty. Good afternoon. I'm Lakeisha Pingshaw. I work for the Office of Information Technology. I didn't want to lose my thoughts, so I kind of took a note on the question that I wanted to ask. So you talked a lot about like workforce development and like skilling up your current talent that you have. But I wanted to ask, you know, when you're hiring talent, so new talent, not the K-12 that got, you know, a while to deal with AI, but if you're hiring talent now, and you know how when you're interviewing people and there's like a typical set of questions that you ask, we all know them, you know, what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, and things like that. But I was interested in your ideas or your recommendations on different questions that could be asked that would give the hiring manager insight on, you know, the potential person's ability to be flexible enough, knowing that there will eventually be some AI or automated or business process re-engineering that, you know, will look to augment some of these things. So what type of things can a hiring manager look for in those interviews, or is there a set of questions? So that's my question.
And I can start this one, because I also don't want to be the last one to speak to hold you from lunch. We recommend, at least from a research perspective, we recommend that when you're interviewing talent, and I'll try to be brief, there's three types of questions that you should ask. There's, of course, what you were referring to is the behavioral event questions, like, tell us about a time where you did this, right? Which I personally did not like answering when I was being interviewed, because I can never come up with the answer quickly. But thinking about those, so behavioral event questioning, situational based questioning. So what would you do if this is the situation? And finally, a work sample test. And quickly, you can incorporate AI questions into all three. So tell us about a time where you've interfaced with AI, for example, and how'd you like it? And in the situational base, what would you do, right, if, and I can't come up with a specific interview question on the spot, but what would you do, right, if you had to encounter, or how would you use AI to do this task, for example? And then the last one, often overlooked, is a short, simple work sample test. And we learned this from an organization in the Netherlands, that they always incorporate a question, and now there's interactive tools that exist that you can share with potential candidates on you put the scenario and they have to actually do the work itself. And that's a great way to understand if you have a great candidate for the role. So I hope that helps.
I think also it really comes down to, do they have that growth mindset? Are they going to embrace that change? So come up with questions that are going to be around that. How adaptable are they? Not so much their current skills, but how much are they willing to learn and adapt on the team. So maybe they don't have it right now, but as long as they kind of embrace that and that's the culture that you want, then that works. We also talk about soft skills, especially if we're going to be, prompt engineering is going to come into play. So maybe test them on soft skills and see how good they are there and see how, willing they are to learn new things, right? And that's what else you can be asking in those interviews.
I'll throw in for our engineering roles at Microsoft, usually they'll sort of throw out a prompt, and in the past would sort of watch. It was more about, not about coming up with the solution. They would let the candidate use a whiteboard and sort of show how they get to the particular solution. And I think I could imagine a similar setup with some AI tools and stuff like that, asking a question and just gives you a chance to observe how they problem solve. So to the earlier point about that problem solving skills are key and soft skills are key, sort of just, and you could pick something that's sort of practical for your department or for the role, but just observe how they go about finding the information. I think you'd learn a lot about sort of how a candidate might approach it.
Well, I know that was the last question, but I have one big picture question that I want to ask. And I think I can attest to the fact that the audience has asked all the frontline and the practical questions and things. I've learned a lot just by sitting here listening to them because of the work that they do. But in management theory, we know that money is not really a motivator. That is open for debate. But organizational culture, policies, and those are the kind of things, that make people to feel a sense of belonging and contribution, and the tasks that they are performing. Those are the things that really satisfy people. Even though lack of money is a dissatisfier, but it's not a motivator. So from a policy perspective, Amy will take that. What policies are companies beginning to put in place, given the acceleration of AI? What policies are companies putting in place to accommodate or facilitate, the advancement of women in participating in AI careers and things like that? I know the obvious thing is remote work from home thing, or is there any other policy element that you people are considering in your big companies from the corporate level?
I can just give an example that at Microsoft, we have sort of very structured sort of objectives, and 3 times a year we do a review process that we call a Connect. And a few years ago, the company has always said that diversity and inclusion is a priority and it's important, but there's a section on the Connect form that every single time I fill out that form, I have to indicate what I did in the last 3 months, the last period, and what I plan to do going forward. And our leaders are being held accountable for that work. And so the intention is that it's flexible and it can be objectives that are aligned with your role and your work, but at the same time, it really does call it out, and it makes you sort of think back to how have I contributed to improving diversity and inclusion, and again, it allows you to focus on which piece of that puzzle you want to focus on, and I find it to be very helpful.
Well, I'll add the communities of practice was mentioned before too. So creating a community of practice of whether it's a community of practice or employee resource group or associate resource group of women in IT or women that are working on AI, but also inviting men to join the group as well so they can learn about the unique challenges that often they're not aware of that happens in the organization that are often getting in the way of the inclusive practices and progression of women in IT.
I work at a very small organization, so I have not some of these big organizational challenges where if I want to do something, I just do it because I can. So there's, flexibility in being small, but then there's also, from past experiences when I did work at larger organizations, I think communities of practices are great. I think, technology and women groups or whatever group you want to define it really is helpful. And yes, it's important to bring men in, but not invite them in to the group, because that now makes it a general group. And I think that there is something to be said about keeping it to women. So yes, you can invite them into conversations, but not to the group. I think that's important. And then also have women in leadership. Be intentional about that. Have women in leadership and make sure that, I said earlier, representation matters. Also, we talked about bias when it comes to AI. It's real. And it's bias on many different levels. We talk about data. One example that I like to bring up is wedding dresses, right? I am Western, right? I think of a white wedding dress. The wedding dresses don't look like that in every single culture. If we just had a table of people from Western culture, we wouldn't incorporate, Indian dresses, for example, where they're very colorful. And I'm like, that's not a wedding dress to me, but that doesn't mean that's not a wedding dress to others. So we need to be mindful of representation. Gender is one of them. Regional diversity is another. In general, I think that that's something that we do need to be mindful of. And that's why sometimes bringing in, those different perspectives really just helps your organization as a whole.
Thank you. So I know we're 10 minutes over, I apologize, but I would like you all to thank our distinguished panel, Kathleen, Amy, and Jose. So thank you so much for the perspective that you brought today. Hopefully this was useful to everyone. So now it's lunchtime. If you forgot what you ordered for lunch, they can tell you at the check-in, but we'll start back up at 1:30. Thank you.